Hi everyone, this is Phil Travis, EUH 2032 here at the State College of Florida. Week number 4. This week, the big assignment this week, paper proposal. This is a Gordon Rule writing class, so to fulfill the Gordon Rule writing class, we have a research paper that is broken into 2 segments. The actual research paper itself is 6 to 9 pages and is due at the end of the term. The first part of the research paper, though, is a paper proposal, and that's what's due this week. And so the paper proposal is basically explaining to me, and I have a template to help guide you on the proposal. It's basically explaining to me what your project is, what you're going to argue, why it's significant, why it matters, as well as what kind of questions you're going to answer and what kind of sources you found and plan to use. Follow the guide for the template, on the template for the paper proposal. It's up there. Use the template. Though take my directions out of the template, but use the template. You do a proposal like this in bulleted form. You'll have a sentence or two for the thesis. You'll have a series of leading questions. You'll have a couple of paragraphs for the significance, maybe 3 paragraphs for the significance portion of the paper. You might even consider making the significance section the introduction to your paper, and that way you have it written already. Because the introduction of a research paper is supposed to explain what the argument is, what kind of questions it will answer, and so forth. And then you'll have a list of sources, and I want at least 5 academic sources or primary sources used on the papers. And use your library. Even if you can't get to campus, you can use your G number and log into the library. You can view ebooks, journal articles. You can view things like the New York Times historical newspaper, and you can view news stories from the time period we're looking at. So there's a lot of sources out there for you to use, and a lot of them can be accessed through your library database system. If you have trouble with that, you can let me know, or just contact the library directly, and they'll help you out, accessing those electronic databases. So I want to see that you're doing some research and you're thinking about your paper. Don't just leave this till Sunday and throw some stuff together. If you do this right, it's actually a pretty easy A, because I'm not going to, your thesis is supposed to evolve, right? As long as it's well written and you fulfill the basic requirements, you should do well on it. So just do it right, follow the directions, and show me that you are really thinking about the paper right now, that you're putting some effort into finding the resources and thinking about what you want to argue. I have a list of possible paper topics in the modules area for this week, as well as the paper proposal template. So this week, paper proposal, that's the big assignment for this week. Your reading for this week is from our textbook, Annihilation, Chapter 2, and then also I have a reading from a book called Soldiers of Destruction, the introduction in Chapter 1. That reading is posted in the Canvas area for this week. That reading is about the organization of the concentration camps in the 1930s in Germany. And our discussion this week is related to both of these readings. I also, as usual, have my recorded presentation up there for you. Please watch those. If you watch, even if you can't sit down and watch the whole thing, you could put the recorded presentation on, turn up your computer speakers, and listen to it while you folded laundry or something. And even that way, it will help you get a grasp of what we're talking about. So I hope everybody, uses those presentations, and I put them up there for you. So I'm hoping that you're using them and that they're helpful for you. At the beginning of the presentation, I say History 437. Ignore that. Their history, it's EUH 2032, and this is one of my presentations that I put together personally. So I hope everybody, they take some time to do these things. I hope everybody gets something out of them. Okay. Oh, by the way, next week we have our midterm exam. So for next week, midterm exam, I have the study guide up there already for you. So you can start, if you have some free time, you can start thinking and looking at that study guide and thinking about preparations for the midterm. That's next week. So you still have 2 weeks until it's due, but the study guide's up now so you can start thinking about that. Okay, factoid for this week. And some of you are still not getting your extra points. Come on, get your extra points. Just watch this and email me this factoid no later than Wednesday this week. Wednesday night by midnight. The factoid for this week is this. Before we're beginning really construction on something called the Maginot Line, which is spelled Maginot, the French began construction on the Maginot Line in the late 1920s. And the Maginot Line was this defensive kind of fortification, bunkers, some bunkers with multiple stories underground, machine gun turrets, the whole 9 yards, artillery encampments that the French built all along the German border, so the border between Germany and France. And the Maginot Line was designed so that if Germany wanted to invade across the French border, that the French would have this huge defensive network and it would be impossible for the Germans to achieve an invasion in that way. Up by Belgium and the Low Countries, the fortifications of the Maginot Line were much, much more sparse. And so it was particularly on the French border. Well, ultimately, to make a long story short, the Germans will, when we get to this point, we'll talk about this next week, the German army basically goes around the Maginot Line, and we'll talk about how this occurs. But the Maginot Line becomes basically, they spent millions on it, and it basically served no functional purpose. At least it didn't prevent the fall of France at all. The Germans just went around the Maginot Line, and it was a complete failure. And so the Maginot Line, the factoid for this week is that the Maginot Line was really a symbol of France's ability to appease Germany and to view the growing German threat in the 1930s from a merely defensive standpoint. The Allies, the French, and the British, and even the United States on the other side of the Atlantic were not interested in sort of taking on Hitler and taking on Nazi Germany when there was still a chance to prevent, the beginning of this ultimately catastrophic war. Instead, the Allies preferred to appease the Nazis. They preferred to appease the Nazis and then sort of sit back and play a defensive role. And so the French Maginot Line really symbolized the predominant idea within France at the time to create a defensive apparatus to prevent a strengthened Germany from overrunning France. But ultimately, they lacked initiative to take the Nazis on, and as a result of that, France was conquered in some 6 weeks at the beginning of World War II, and the Maginot Line was not even really attacked in a meaningful way. And so the Maginot Line, a symbol of the outlook of the French towards the possibility of war with Germany during the 1930s. Okay, I hope that's clear. Email that factoid to me no later than Wednesday by midnight, and let's have a great week.